So when we last were talking, there was this wild transfer agreement that was struck up during World War II, and these are some of the paperwork that make it happen. So it started off with this guy, Arlo, sorry if I'm saying it wrong, Arlo Soroff. So he was getting his PhD in Germany, had a girlfriend. Her name was Magda. Later, she became the wife of whom?
Goebbels.
Joseph Goebbels. And Joseph Goebbels was the propaganda maestro. He spanned Hitler and made him look good. He did posters, he did movies, he did newsreels, he did thousands and thousands of people in an arena with him as the key speaker. So it's absolutely amazing. So Chaim Arlosov basically made a trip to Germany during the middle of World War II to say, okay, I got a great idea. This is like the kid in class who raises their hand, first all the time. And you think, oh my gosh, this guy's gonna get shot, he's gonna get killed. So he goes to Germany and he makes a deal. He's like, you don't like Jews? We love them. Send them to Palestine and they'll liquidate all their assets here in Germany, and we will take the money in a bank down in Palestine, and then we'll buy nothing but German goods because we need goods and you guys need to sell them. And they'll sell them in Palestine, and then we'll give the proceeds back to the families who liquidated all their assets in Germany. So believe it or not, both sides said, this is a good idea. We can get rid of our Jews, you can take them, and you'll buy German goods with the products. So it's absolutely amazing that this even went off, but it was all because of Magda. And these are different transfer agreements and how it would work. So over 20,000 German Jews took this plan and got out. And where it stopped was basically Jabotinsky. This guy found out about it, and he was railing against Ben-Gurion and others who were doing this deal and said, you've made a deal with the devil in the pale moonlight, this should never have happened. But what resulted from it is Arlosov's death. So the revisionist newspaper Hatis Mayam, the People's Front, ran a column on June 16th, 1933, condemning Arlosorov's agreement and warning that the Jewish people will know how to respond to this odious act. So they just took it as a slap in the face. Why? Because everybody who was Jewish was boycotting German goods at the time. So what this transfer agreement entailed was you liquidated the Jewish German assets, you sent it to Palestine, they bought German goods and sold them in Palestine. So basically these things were appearing on the shelves and people could see that they were buying German goods. Later the same night, Chaim Arlosov and his wife Selma went for a stroll on the Tel Aviv beach. Out of the dark, two men approached, one shining a flashlight in Arlosov's face while the other pulled the gun and fired. Arlosov was rushed to the hospital, but he died a few hours later on the operating table. So this guy that saved 20,000 Jews was killed by a Jew in Palestine because he didn't like his politics. It was a real bottomed out moment for people who had come to Israel to live and were trying to help the Jews out of Europe. So it's pretty amazing. Can I get a reader for this one? I'm roasting. Oof.
Jabotinsky's
Jabotinsky, yeah.
Whatever his name is, revisionist party was immediately blamed for the murder. 2 days later, Abraham Sarvasky, a member of the revisionist movement organized Qatar, was arrested after SEMA identified him as the man with the flashlight. 2 other revisionists were arrested, one as an accomplice and the other with as the gunman.
Thank you. So basically this doesn't end well. So Slavsky, initially convicted his sons to death, was freed in 1934 when he was overturned by the British Court of Appeals in Palestine. No one was ever convicted of this crime, and Orlosov's assassination remains a mystery. His murder would not be the last time Jew killed Jews over political agreements in the Jewish state. So this was a big setback because more people could have been saved, but his death by Jabotinsky's group was really amazing. I want to talk about some of the other options besides the transfer agreement, which 20,000 people got out. There's a phenomenal book if you haven't read it. I know Phil Kapustas mentioned it in one of his exhortations. It's called The Envoy, and it's about Raoul Wallenberg. He did the impossible right at the end of the war. So we're talking about 1944, 1945. He was a Swedish diplomat who saved the lives of tens of thousands of Jews in Budapest in the second half of 1944. He actually did it all in 6 months, and he saved over 200,000 Jews from Romania and I believe Bulgaria. So with the support of the World Jewish Congress and the American Refugee Board, the Swedish foreign minister sent Wallenberg to Budapest in July 1944 to help protect 200,000 Jews who remained in the capital. From October 15th, the Arrow Cross seized power to the liberation of the capital. 3 months later, Wallenberg saved Jews through a variety of means by issuing thousands of protective documents and by establishing an international ghetto in protected houses, and by securing the release and deportation trains, death march convoys, labor service brigades, all at significant risk to himself. So this guy was bold with a capital B. Raoul Wallenberg printed out these Swedish passports like candy and filled people's names in with them and said, these are Swedish citizens. I mean, you've never seen so many Swedish citizens living in Romania and Bulgaria. I'm like, holy cow, how did he pull this off? And not only that, he protected them. And when the Germans came in, because the Germans had come in late into this country, and they were like, we got to round up all these Jews and kill them in less than a year because time's running out. You know, Germany's on its last threshold. So basically, he would start putting them on trucks and sending them to a concentration camp. Raoul Wallenberg would say, you drive up to these trucks and say, what are you doing? You have no right to take our Swedish citizens. And then while they're getting them off the truck, hand them their passports. So it's just an amazing story. This guy was very bold and able to accomplish a lot. So I will never be able to go back to Sweden without knowing inside myself that I had done all a man could do to save as many Jews as possible. So he was born in 1912 in Stockholm, Sweden. After studying in the United States in the 1930s and establishing himself as a business career in Sweden, and his family was very wealthy, Wallenberg was recruited by the U.S. War Refugee Board in June 1944 to travel to Hungary. Given status as a diplomat by the Swedish delegation, Wallenberg's task was to do what he could to assist to save the Hungarian Jews. And everything he did was pretty unbelievable and amazing. Assigned the first secretary of the Swedish legation in Hungary, Wallenberg arrived in Budapest July 9th, 1944. So we're almost at the end of the war. And what he did in 6 months is mind-blowing. I don't know how one man could have accomplished this. So it says, despite a complete lack of experience in diplomacy and clandestine operations, he led one of the most extensive and successful rescue efforts during the Holocaust. His work with the WRB prevented the deportation of basically 200,000 Hungarian Jews. So there was a lot of death marches because the Germans were running out of trucks, running out of gasoline, running out of trains to operate. So it's just like, okay, it's a death march, we're gonna kill you anyway, so who cares? Hungary had been an ally of Germany, but German defeats had mounted and Hungarian losses led Hungary to keep an armistice with the Western Allies. To forestall these feelers, German forces occupied Hungary in March 19, 1944, and forced the Hungarian head of state, Miklos Horthy, to attend a pro-German government under the dome Soche. The Soche government was prepared not only to continue the war, but also to deport Hungarian Jews to German-occupied Poland. Shortly after the occupation, Hungarian officials began to round up Hungarian Jews and to transfer them into German custody. So basically, Germany flip-flopped the Hungarian government, forcing them to give up your Jews and to deport them to Poland or to Germany to be extinguished. Does everybody know what a death march is? Okay. By 1944, the Hungarians and the Germans had deported nearly 440,000 Jews from Hungary, almost all of them to Auschwitz or Birkenau, where the SS killed approximately 320,000 of them upon their arrival and deported the rest to forced labor in Auschwitz and other camps. Early 200,000 Jews remained in Budapest, and the Hungarian authorities intended to deport them as well in compliance with German requests. So this was all happening very fast. They were rounding them up, sending them to Auschwitz as fast as they could, and the only one who stood in their way was Raoul Wallenberg. Can I get a reader for this one, Becky?
With authorization from the Swedish government, Wallenberg began distributing certificates of protection issued by the Swedish legation to Jews in Budapest shortly after his arrival in the Hungarian capital. He used WRB and Swedish funds to establish hospitals, nurseries, and a soup kitchen, and to designate more than 30 safe houses that together formed the core of the International Ghetto in Budapest. The International Ghetto was reserved for Jews and their families holding certificates of protection from a neutral country.
So he bought all these buildings right next to each other, and he just said, this is basically an embassy. So tell me how an embassy is treated legally in a foreign country. It's sovereign territory, meaning that what?
It is a piece of that country. So
All the laws of Sweden are there in this part of the country. Yeah, it's basically an enclave. It's a country within a country, and that's what he was building out over and over again to protect all these Jews. So it's pretty amazing. I'll get another reader for this slide.
After the Hungarian fascist Arrow Cross movement seized power with the help of the Germans on October 15, 1944, the Arrow Cross government resumed the deportation of Hungarian Jews, which Horthy had halted in July before the Budapest Jews could be deported. As Soviet troops had already cut off rail transport routes to Auschwitz, Hungarian authorities forced tens of thousands of Budapest Jews to march west to the Hungarian border with Austria. During the autumn of 1944, Wallenberg repeatedly and often personally intervened to secure the release of those with certificates of protection or forged papers, saving as many people as he could from the marching columns.
So if you can imagine doing all of this, getting all their names, their birth dates, putting them into forged passports and cranking them out as fast as you could to save all these people. I mean, you'd have to have a small army of people and volunteers who would help you to accomplish something like this. It isn't a small effort of saving a few Jews in your attic. This is well over 200,000 Jews that had to be done in 6 months. So this is a picture of them. This is in front of the parliament, I believe, in Budapest. Correct me if I'm wrong. So Wallenberg's colleagues, I'm sorry? Okay.
These were passports. How did he get the names of the people to the people? I mean,
they came in and out of hiding all over the place to him, and he would, as long as they got to the enclave, he was able to give them papers and to transport them out of there. But it's just incredible how he had to work with all these different businessmen around the world, really, to make this all possible.
so they came to him to get their passport.
Or he could find some in the underground, but he was so busy handling all the administration part of it. They knew who he was, and they would find him, and then he would give them the Swedish passports and get them out of the country. You're welcome. you have another reader for this one, or shall I read it?
Wallenberg's colleagues in the Swedish legation and diplomats from other neutral countries also participated in rescue operations. Karl Lutz, the consul general in the Swiss legation, issued certificates of immigration, placing nearly 50,000 Jews in Budapest under Swiss protection as potential immigrants to Palestine. Italian businessman Giorgio Perlasca posed as a Spanish diplomat, closely assisted by Lazzolo and Eugenia Zarmosi. Perlasca issued to many Jews in Budapest certificates of protection for nations whose interests neutral Spain represented, and established safe houses, including one for Jewish children.
Okay, so I know this sounds a little confusing, but you got Italians, Swiss, Spanish, all working to mimic what Raoul Wallenberg was doing and issue them passports from their countries. So it kind of masked the situation a little better. It wasn't all Swedish people who were leaving the country. By the way, just curious, do Swedish people look like Jewish people? What would you say the differences were? Yeah, so it's a little hard to hide. Oh, I'm Swedish when you've got dark hairs, olive-colored skin, and it's not easy to pull this off. So part of the thing was he had to convince other diplomats to say, oh, they're Swiss, or they're Italian, or they're Spanish. So let's understand one thing about Spain at this time. Germany made allies with who during World War II? Well, they took Austria. They made a big deal with Italy, with Mussolini, and with the Emperor of Japan. Were these guys really friends and allies? But did they have the same enemies? Yes, that's why they came together. It wasn't like they really liked each other at all. So the one who was the outlier is Spain. Franco was the dictator there. He liked Hitler liked him, but he was like, nah, we're staying out of this fight. Why did Spain stay out of the fight? Why were they more or less neutral during the war? Even so, they sold arms to probably both sides. The Spanish Civil War had completely decimated the country. There was just abject poverty. Hundreds of people missing, 100 people, still wounded. So that's why Spain stayed out of the deal, was they couldn't fight. They were completely worn out by their own war. Okay, so after the liberation of Budapest, the Soviet forces liberated Budapest in February 1945, and this is the really sad part to me. More than 100,000 Jews remained, mostly because of the efforts of Wallenberg and his colleagues. Wallenberg was last seen in the company of the Soviet officials on January 17, 1945, in the Red Army view his term of glossary besieged Budapest. He was presumably detained on suspicion of espionage and subsequently disappeared. A Soviet government report in 1956 suggested that Wallenberg had died on July 17, 1947, while imprisoned in the Soviet authorities at the infamous prison in Moscow. I don't know how to, is it Lubyanka? Is that right? Subsequently, eyewitnesses' sightings of Wallenberg and the Soviet penal system after 1947 has called this statement into question. How the exact dates of his circumstances of Wallenberg's death are unknown and may never be declared. In October 2016, 71 years after his disappearance, Swedish officials officially declared Wallenberg legally dead. So nobody knows what happened to him. I didn't know, Phil, if you had anything to add, because I know you've read it and studied it. Okay. But a tremendous effort by him. There are literally monuments to him all over that area. These are two different ones. Here's some other ones talking about the efforts of what he did and how much he accomplished. And there's a couple of movies on him as well. So I'm sure you all have heard about the next one because there's a famous movie about him. There was also one on Wallenberg, but it isn't more updated than it is. So Oskar Schindler is an interesting kind of rogue guy. He didn't start out being this magnanimous hero. He started out wanting to make money. So can I get a reader for this slide? Nobody wants to read about Oskar Schindler? Daniel. Okay, great.
Oskar Schindler was born on April 28th of 1908 in Svitavy, Moravia, at the time a province of the Austria-Hungary monarchy. An ethnic German and a Catholic, he remained in Svitavy during the interwar period and held Czech citizenship after Moravia was incorporated into the newly established Czechoslovak Republic in 1918. After attending a series of trade schools in Brno and marrying Emil Peltz in 1928, Schindler held a variety of jobs, including working in his father's farm machinery business in Svitavy, opening a driving school in Sumperk, and selling government property in Brno. Should I keep going all the way?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. He also served the Czechoslovak army and in 1938 attained the rank of Lance Corporal in the reserves. Schindler began working with the Amt Auslands Abwehr office in the military foreign intelligence of the German armed forces in 1936. In 1939, 5 months after the German annexation of the Sudetenland, view this term in the glossary, he joined the Nazi Party. An opportunist businessman with a taste for the finer things in life, he seemed an unlikely candidate to become a wartime rescuer. During World War II, Schindler would rescue more than 1,000 Jews from deportation to Auschwitz, Nazi Germany's largest camp complex.
So to put this in perspective, you would have to have 2,000 Oskar Schindlers to equal one Raoul Wallenberg. That's the difference in how many people they were able to save. And we know part of what he did was he used Jewish money to buy the factory and to make everything happen, but also he basically wined and dined the entire SS. He sent them flowers on their anniversaries and holidays and gift baskets full of goodies, and constantly went to their parties and all that kind of stuff. So he befriended them so he could get them to do what he wanted them to do. So in the view of archival details, the German invasion of occupied Poland, Schindler moved to Krakow in October of 1939. Now, Krakow is important because those were the people he was able to help and save that he wouldn't have otherwise. And literally his factory is across, I think, a railroad track from the actual prison. So he was in the prime location to actually do some good. After taking the German occupation program, Jewish-owned and Polish-owned businesses in the so-called general government viewed this term, and he brought Record Limited, a Jewish-owned enamelware manufacturer, in November of 1939. He converted the plant to establish a German factory after his wife. So he does this, and we can see it in the movie. I just wanted you to see this map really quick because the ghetto is below the river, and then Oskar Schindler's enamelware factory is literally across the railroad tracks from that, and then the Plaszow concentration camp is just below that. So he's not only in the right city, but in the right part of the city to be of aid to all of this, and a lot of people don't know that. And Krakow, Poland was a gorgeous city before all this began. It was a tourist destination, but after this, it's forever synonymous with the camp. Can I get a reader for this one? Close by. Okay, thanks.
Schindler operated 2 other factories in Krakow. Only at Amalia did he employ Jewish workers who resided in the nearby Krakow ghetto. At its peak strength in 1944, Amalia employed 1,700 workers. At least 1,000 were Jewish forced laborers, whom the Germans had relocated from the Krakow ghetto after its liquidation in March 1943 to the forced labor camp and later concentration camp Krakow-Plaszow. Although the prisoners deployed at Amalia were still subject to the brutal conditions of the Plaszow concentration camp, Schindler intervened repeatedly on their behalf. He used bribes and personal diplomacy both for the well-being of Jews threatened on an individual basis and to ensure until late 1944 that the SS did not deport his Jewish workers. In order to claim the Jewish workers to be essential to the war effort, he added an armaments manufacturing division to Amalia. During the liquidation of the Krakow ghetto in March 1943, Schindler allowed his Jewish workers to stay at the factory overnight.
Yeah, that was a big change, and he's a guy who's gradually changing. He doesn't become the man he was at the end right away. It happens over time, and he realizes these people look to him as a way to be saved from destruction. What's also interesting is he made all the right moves as he goes along. He realizes, okay, putting an ammo on pots and pans is not going to get me high in the SS hierarchy. So he starts doing military manufacturing, but he makes sure what happens to these military munitions that he creates. None of them worked. He didn't want one shell to work after this. So it's funny. We sort of admire him because he gradually comes to the right decisions. Do I have a reader for this slide? Okay. Thanks, Keelan.
After the SS redesignated Plaszow as a concentration camp in August 1943, Schindler persuaded the SS to convert Amalia into a subcamp of Plaszow. In addition to the approximately 1,000 Jewish forced laborers registered as factory workers, Schindler permitted 450 Jews working in other nearby factories to live at Amalia as well. This saved them from the systematic brutality and arbitrary murder that was part of the daily life in Plaszow. Schindler did not act here without risk or cost. His protection of his Jewish workers and some of his shady business dealings led SS and police authorities to suspect him of corruption and of giving unauthorized aid to Jews. German SS and police officials arrested him 3 times while he owned Amalia, but were unable to charge him.
So he was a slippery little guy. He got away over and over and over again. And they tried to arrest him. They tried to do everything, but he really outthought and outmaneuvered his SS officers. And he had warmed them up so much at the beginning, but he basically said, well, I need to protect these set of Jews because they're my factory workers. And that's basically how he always approached it. But then he's like, if you touch them, if you harass them, if you bother them, you're interrupting the German war effort. So it got stronger and stronger language as he went through. In October 1944, after the SS transferred Amelia Jews to Plaszow, Schindler sought and obtained authorization to relocate his plant to Brunitz in Moravia and reopen it exclusively as an armaments factory. One of the assistants drew several versions of the list of up to 1,200 Jewish prisoners needed to work at this new factory. 3 lists came to be known collectively as Schindler's List. Schindler met with specifications required by the SS to classify Brunitz as a sub-camp of Gross-Rosen concentration camp and thereby facilitate the survival of about 800 Jewish men whom the SS had deported from Plaszow to Gross-Rosen to Brunitz, between 300 and 400 Jewish women from Pazlov to Auschwitz. So basically, he had to turn his factories into a sub-camp of a concentration camp to save them. Which, if you think about it, is pretty unbelievable to think like that. It's like, my factory is not only a place of work, it's a place for them to live so they can escape the brutality of these concentration camps. And it isn't an easy transition to take a warehouse, pick any one you want in Richmond, and turn it into a place for 1,000 people to sleep and stay. It's just pretty amazing. So, although classified as an armaments factory, the Brunitz plant produced just 1 wagon load of live ammunition in just under 8 months of operation. I just think that's a staggering statistic of incompetence, but that's what they wanted. He presented bogus production figures. Schindler justified the existence of a subcamp as an armaments factory. This facilitated the survival of over 1,000 Jews, sparing them from the horrors and brutalities of conventional camp life. Schindler left Brunitz only in May 9th, 1945, the day that the Soviet troops liberated the camp. So he was lucky to get out because that wasn't the fate of Raoul Wallenberg. After World War II, Schindler and his wife Emil settled in Regensburg, Germany until 1949 when he immigrated to Argentina. In 1957, permanently separated but not divorced from Emil, Schindler returned alone to Germany. Schindler died in Germany penniless and almost unknown in October 1974. Many of those who survived, he had facilitated, and their descendants lobbied for and financed the transfer of his body for burial in Israel. So pretty amazing that they didn't forget who he was and they brought him back. Also in 1993, United States Holocaust Memorial Council posthumously presented the museum's Medal of Remembrance to Schindler. Rarely represented, this medal honors deserving recipients for extraordinary deeds during the Holocaust and the cause of remembrance. Emil Schindler accepted the medal on behalf of her ex-husband in the ceremony at the museum's Hall of Remembrance. So this is a map I really wanted to talk about what happened to the jewelry of Europe after the war was over. So this is the population in 1933. This is 2015. And you can see the largest part was actually in what is now Ukraine and Poland. Those are the darkest one. Actually, Poland's the darkest. So inside of that, it says 3 million. In Ukraine, it's 2,525,000. But these Eastern European and almost into Russia were the places that the Jews had actually been welcomed. So Poland specifically, their king was the one who welcomed them after they were kicked out of France and Spain and England and Germany in times past. So that's why the highest concentration was there. And if you remember, what year was Poland invaded by Germany? 39. So you can see the huge difference. So this is one of the other passages that I think kind of predicts part of the Holocaust, is Zechariah chapter 13, verse 8. In the whole land, says the Lord, 2/3 will be cut off and perish, and 1/3 will be left alive. And I will put this third into the fire, refine them as refined silver, test them as gold is tested. They will call on my name, and I will answer them. I will say, they are my people, and they will say, the Lord is our God. So that's exactly the percentage, 2/3, that we see. Last week, do you all remember what passage we read from one of the major prophets that was a sort of a prediction of the Holocaust? If you go with me to Jeremiah 16, that's where, and I've had a lot of discussions with this with other brothers because I didn't want to be wresting scripture or pulling something out of a hat. Obviously, Jeremiah and the others, meaning Isaiah and Ezekiel, all wanted to talk about the Babylonian captivity that was coming to them. But the other point is that in this, you see so much of what actually happened during the Holocaust to them. And the preceding chapters are also talking about what was happening. He tells Jeremiah in the first part of it that he can't marry, but I was wondering if we can just have our readers and just pass it down the row, starting at verse 4 and going to the end of the chapter. That would be great.
They shall die of grievous deaths. They shall not be lamented, neither shall they be buried, but they shall be as during upon the face of the earth, and they shall be consumed by the sword and by famine, and their carcasses shall be meat for the fowls of heaven and for the beasts of the earth. For thus saith the Lord, enter not into the house of mourning, neither go to lament, nor bemoan them, for I have taken away my peace from this people, saith the Lord, even loving kindness and mercies. Both the great and the small shall die in this land. They shall not be buried, neither shall men lament for them, nor cut themselves, nor make themselves bald for them. Neither shall men tear themselves for them in the morning, to comfort them for the dead. Neither shall men give them the cup of consolation to drink for their father or for their mother. Thou shalt not also go into the house of feasting to sit with them to eat and to drink. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will Cause to cease out of this place in your eyes and in your days the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness and the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride.
And when you tell his people all these words, and they say to you, why has the Lord pronounced all this great evil against us? What is our iniquity? What is the sin that we have committed against the Lord our God? Then you shall say to them, because your fathers have forsaken me, says the Lord, and have gone after other gods and have served and worshipped them, and have forsaken me and have not kept my law. And because you have done worse than your fathers, for behold, every one of you follows his stubborn evil will, refusing to listen to me. Therefore I will hurl you out of this land and into a land which neither you nor your fathers have known, and you shall serve other gods day and night, for I will show you no favor. How far are we going?
That's good.
Okay.
How many more verses are left? Okay. The rest of it talks about the restoration of Israel after this event, but the first part of it, you can definitely see how it fits with the Holocaust almost completely. And another passage we're going to go to, which I asked Jason to read, is Jeremiah chapter 30. And we're going to start in verse 4 there and end at 11.
Jeremiah 30,
Actually, go through 17.
verse 4 through 17.
And the last part of this chapter also talks about the restoration. So what I want you to remember is Jeremiah 16, Jeremiah 30, and Psalms 102 have the same pattern to them. It talks about this Holocaust period, and then after it, it talks about restoration. So people say, well, how can you say he predicted the Holocaust? Here's the thing. Did God ever not warn them about the impending doom that was going to happen? He warned Abraham in Genesis 15 about their going down to Egypt for 400 years in slavery. He warned them about Sodom and Gomorrah. He also warned his people about the Babylonian captivity for 285 years. So we'll read this real quick because I know it's ending.
Jeremiah 30, starting in verse 4 through 17. Now these are the words that the Lord spoke concerning Israel and Judah. For thus says the Lord, we have heard a voice of trembling, of fear, and not of peace. Ask now and see whether a man is ever in labor with child. So why do I see every man with his hands on his loins, like a woman in labor, and all the faces turn pale? Alas, for the day is great, so that none is like it. It is the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. For it shall come to pass in that day, says the Lord of hosts, that I will break his yoke from your neck and burst your bonds. Foreigners shall no more enslave them. They shall serve the Lord their God, and David their king, whom I will raise up for them. Therefore do not fear, O my servant Jacob, says the Lord, nor be dismayed, O Israel. For behold, I will save you from afar, and your seed from the land of the captivity. Jacob shall return and have rest and quiet, and no one shall make him afraid. For I am with you, says the Lord, to save you. If I make a full end of all nations, where I have scattered you, yet I will not make a complete end of you. And I will correct you in justice, and I will not let you go altogether unpunished. For thus says the Lord, your affliction is incurable, your wound is severe. There is no one to plead your cause, that you may be bound up. You have no healing medicines. All your lovers have forgotten you. They do not seek you, for I have wounded you with the wound of an enemy, with the chastisement of a cruel one, for the multitude of your iniquities, because your sins have increased.
Okay, stop there for a second. So all I'm trying to show you is that in all the other places in Scripture, including Christ in 70 AD, he warned the people what was going to happen. So my question is, why wouldn't he warn them about this event? So Christ warned about 70 AD. The major and minor prophets warned Israel for 285 years what was going to happen. Even Nineveh, who wasn't a beloved city, was warned by Jonah. So why would the Holocaust not be predicted? That's my question. And I think the possible answer is Jeremiah 16, Jeremiah 30, and Psalms 102, which we'll read next week. So thank you for your time.